Hello and welcome to The Appointment. I am Pranjal Sharma. Joining me today for a conversation is TV Mohandas Pai. He is the chairman of Manipal Global. Mohan, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
You wear several hats. You've been a technology leader, but today I'd like to discuss some of the issues in the education sector, which you are pretty passionate about. At Manipal, let me begin with the organization that you head and which has also been synonymous with excellence for many decades. Tell us about the changes that are happening there. How is Manipal evolving for a new generation of young students who are joining the mainstream?
See, Manipal has a university in Manipal, in the Panchayat of Manipal, which is about more than 60 years old. It's a medical school, an engineering school, and now some social sciences. Then there's a university in Sikkim, which started about 15 years ago. And there's a new university which has come up in Jaipur, which is just about 4 years. The entire system runs as independent universities linked at certain levels. And I think they're doing very well. In medicine, Manipal in the private sector is clearly #1. In engineering, they're among the top 50. And they started engineering way back in 1956-57. So I think it goes back a long way before the next IIT systems came. And, in fact, Satya Nadella is from MIT, our Manipal Institute of Technology. So Satya is there and many of the eminent people are there. Then Manipal Global is a corporation set up to run universities outside India. We have a university in Kuala Lumpur called Manipal International University, which is on technology. We have a medical school, the Manipal Malacca Medical School in Malacca, Malaysia. And about 20% of all doctors in Malaysia have been educated in Manipal. And then we have a medical university in Nepal. We have a university in Dubai, which is engineering and social and other areas. And then we have a medical university in Antigua, which produces 500 doctors for the US market. These are all Americans, mostly white.
This is a very fantastic example, or perhaps one of the few examples of Indian education service providers going global.
Absolutely, because Manipal has always been global. I mean, 15-20% students of Manipal for many years came from outside India till the government started putting restrictions. So we were invited by the Malaysian government to set up shop there. The Nepalese government had us to set up shop. Many other governments have, but we are not ventured out. So we are probably the largest global education group in India. And I think it's fantastic. The quality is very good. There's great excess demand. Within India, we have an online education for Sikkim Manipal.
How has it evolved? How has the group and its education at the institutions that it has?
Started by Dr. TMA Pai, who started the medical college. He used to take what is called capitation fee. That is, ask the parents to pay in advance.
Which was such a terrible phrase those days.
No, people didn't understand what it meant because the first private medical college and medical education is expensive. So people have to pay money and they're all accounted for, they're all spent on infrastructure. If you go to Manipal, it's possibly in the top 5 best universities in terms of infrastructure and capability and the best private sector university in medicine. So you've got to see what happens. And I think he's done very well. Maybe 50,000 doctors have gone from there over the last 60 years. And I think it's truly extraordinary. And then based upon that, when Dr. Ramdas Pai took over, maybe 25 years ago, he globalized. He went to Sikkim and he went to Malacca, and then his son came in, and Ranjan is, understands the world. So he's expanded in Jaipur, he's expanded in Malaysia, he's expanded in Antigua.
But in terms of the kind of, there is a lot of focus on EdTech or education technology, and there are a lot of new formats which are emerging. So what is Manipal's view on that?
In terms of online education, Manipal is a leader in the private sector. At one point of time, we had 250,000 people getting online education and getting a degree from Sikkim Manipal University. We had a fantastic technology. It still is there, except government has now restricted and said online cannot be beyond the borders of Sikkim. It's a very unbelievable statement from the government. So there's a issue, and they're still going round and round. So, and globally too, we have a lot of people taking that online education. We have an online university in Malaysia, and we have done that. So in terms of MOOCs, if you take online, we are very large. Then in terms of classroom work, we already have the flipped classroom work in India. And I think that's working very well in the universities. We have the largest lab for medical education within India, where we have artificial bodies which react based upon what you do. And we have one of the largest chairs in dentistry. So the equipment, everything else is the latest state-of-the-art technology to teach medicine.
Where the kind of delivery of education in India is always still rooted into the British era. Critical thinking, focus on experience, experimenting. Is that something
Pranjal, the regulatory nightmare in medicine is unbelievable. Our syllabus is antiquated in India. You cannot innovate, you cannot do something. And when you work at Antigua and Malaysia, the syllabus is far ahead of what is required. Many of the things that you do in India is not required. The teacher-student ratio is very high. It increases the cost of education. And the infrastructure required in terms of some silly hall or others is too much. I mean, the regulatory cholesterol in this country is enormous, and that is stifling innovation. All the nice things you want in this country, we can't do because we have no freedom. Everything is dictated to the rule. And even in technical education now it's coming down, but it's been dictated by the rule. And there is harassment at various levels because people come for inspection, and inspection doesn't go well because of various other reasons. Some bad people get away with inspection and they pass it, and good people who follow the rule get harassed in this country. So this is the problem.
This is a very important issue. I'll come to that in a bit. But tell me also, does Manipal Global look at skilling as a concept?
Manipal Global has got a joint venture, City and Guilds of London.
Right.
And we do skilling and we do certification. Right. We got a loss of 25 crores because skilling doesn't work for one important reason. The skilled employee as a fresher doesn't get more salary than a person picked up from the streets. If the employee is not willing to pay, who is going to bear the cost of skilling? And the cost of skilling a good person is quite high. For 3-4 months, it costs you 20,000-25,000 rupees. Nobody is willing to pay. So I think there's a structure there. But I think more than that, what Manipal has done in terms of banking, for example, we train about 7,000 bankers a year. 30-40% of all banking officers in this country have been trained for us. And these people go to the banks and they're ready to work. They're very productive right from the beginning. And they created a community over the last 5-6 years, and they're highly valued by all of the banks. Any new bank comes, they want to get an alumnus of this particular institution, and I think is the largest one. And then we have an assessment business called Meritrack, which does a lot of assessment, 5.5-6 million assessments all over the country. So we have structured all this to provide services in the education area, but we prefer working outside India much more because the regulatory mechanism is very clear.
That's the point, Mohan. The environment in India for education and innovation is very stifling. You were also the head of the education committee at FICCI, and I know you try to make a lot of change for the industry and its interaction with the government. What needs to be done to open up and allow education to breathe?
Pranjal, in May of 1991, a gentleman stood up in Parliament and liberated us economically from the stifling controls of the Nehruvian era. We have not had such a moment in education. And let me give you an inkling of the size of the Indian education system. 850 plus universities, 47,000 colleges, 3.1 crore students. A gross enrollment rate of 23% at this point of time. And we estimate in our FICCI Higher Education Vision Report 2030, by 2030 it will go up to 7 crore people and 50% gross enrollment rate in the age group of 18 to 23. And there's disparity between the various regions. The whole of the south has a GER of 30%. Tamil Nadu has 44%. 44% of young people in the age group of 18 to 23 go to college. And West Bengal has something like 15%. Rajasthan has maybe 19-20%. Gujarat has 19%.
But the education they're getting is perhaps not relevant.
No, I will explain to you. So we have this huge education infrastructure, and we have regulators like a UGC which sits in Delhi. A few people believe they have the wisdom to determine what is required. And then we have AICT for technical education. And when they have good heads, it's work. When they don't have good heads, it becomes control. Then you have MHRD laying policy. And all are diverse from what is happening in the ground.
And they still think in 1960s.
And they're still thinking in 1960s, 1970s control. For example, the Indian Institute of Science had a 4-year degree program. UGC sent a notice to say, why should you have a 4-year degree program? Have you asked us? Now, Indian science is 100 years old. After 100 years of deliberation, they had a BTech program. 100 years of deliberation. On top of that, they were asked questions. University of Delhi had a 4-year program, and they started off and finished 1 year. And the government said that the visitor has not approved. The papers for the visitor has to go from the government. If government has already signed off and told them, we'll get the paperwork, then they started. And it created all this hula bullo. That means universities don't have autonomy in our country. And to give you some data, 65% of education is done by the private sector, 3% by the union government through 130 universities, and the balance by the state government.
But even those private universities have to work under the regulatory framework, which does not allow them to innovate.
They do not allow them to innovate because the academic freedom to set your own courses, have a mix of courses not there. Can they give any courses with particular credits and have a mix and match like the United States? No. They have to follow a rigid idea. They have to give a degree as per the nomenclature in the UGC Act. Otherwise, UGC will not recognize.
But some of the state governments are allowing these 4-year courses, so there is some level of flexibility.
The state governments are allowing that, but the special law that the UGC Act, under which UGC takes shelter, will send them a notice and stop it. So they are stifling innovation. There's too much of control. See, if you want a good education system, first our universities should be liberated from UGC and AICTE. They must have norms and leave it to the universities to the academic council to set the degree and everything else. And then the market will tell who is giving a good degree, who is giving a bad degree. Now, if you get a degree from certain states, nobody is going to employ you. Is already working there. Out of 4,500 engineering colleges, 200 die every year because they're surplus and they're all dying for bad quality. What AICTE could not do in the past in shutting down bad quality is happening because there is surplus capacity. And in the medical college, there is less capacity. There are only 50,000 seats where there's a requirement of 75, 90,000. So there is a monopoly of control. So unless that's broken, universities should have full autonomy, administrative autonomy, they should have financial autonomy, and they should have academic autonomy.
What kind of conversations have you had as a representative of the FICCI Committee on Education?
We have gone and met
with the government.
The secretaries are open, but nothing happens. We have met with 4 ministers, with the three ministers in the last 3-4 years. And ministers have been good, they hear, but some ministers don't want to hear. They don't want to talk to you. They want to shut you out, and they tell you, we don't need the private sector. One minister told a committee, consists of many vice chancellors, we know everything, whatever you tell us, we're already doing, we don't need you, we don't want the private sector. Now, the MHRD minister of this country cannot speak to academics and vice chancellor in this manner. You have to treat people with respect. You have to learn to listen. The minister is not born with great wisdom. You have to listen to everybody. It's a large, complex system. This is the largest education system in the world. And you can't run it from one single place. It has to be left open. The university should have full autonomy. The state universities don't have financial autonomy because they get grants from the government, C&AG. Suppose like the IITs, you charge full fees and the government gives scholarships to students, which you recommended, then it could happen. So, and in terms of academic autonomy, you can have broad guidelines and tell the academic council to take these broad guidelines and imbibe and innovate and let the colleges do what they want. In the best system in the world in the United States, is the professors who design courses, professors who grade, and professors give the degree. And the degree, because given by the university, is recognized. Now here, if you have a degree with the nomenclature UC has, you have to do it. And all they say is, oh, there are bad people. Private sector is bad. They manipulate, they do everything. And the state sector, barring the central universities, 40-50% is totally rotten. And we've seen many misuse happening. So here we created a structure where good people can't do well because they're all stifled, and the bad people do what they want, and the government cannot do anything with them because there's regulatory capture. So I think we have to let these universities open, let them free, fund the students, not the universities, and ask them to have the best-in-class people. And in some states in this country, the vice chancellors, I'll tell you honestly, I know personally, are appointed on paying money to whoever has to appoint them. Very clear. I see it with my eyes. I know people who have done that, and I can give you names. I don't want to give names. It happens. So what kind of education system are you creating our children? It pains us.
That's a good question. You've given a very emphatic and passionate roadmap for change. The budget has also made some changes. There's also talk of allowing foreign institutions to come into India, but it's like asking foreign universities to compete with Indian universities who don't really have the capability to compete. So what's going to happen?
Pranjal, I'm very happy the Prime Minister recently took a meeting of higher education, and I hear that he's asked certain questions. And today we had a meeting in an institution, and one of the joint secretaries told me the Prime Minister is very concerned about what is happening. So I think it's very good news. I have full faith that he'll do something because he understands Make in India, Skill Up India, Start Up India cannot work unless we reform higher education, and the time has come to open up. Second, in the budget, they made a very lovely announcement that we're going to have 20 institutions, 10 in public sector, 10 in private sector, who are going to be selected on a competitive basis and who are going to get full freedom away from the regulatory closed of UGC or AICTE, left free on their own, and we're very happy about that because it's a right model. All right. And the third, which is a very important thing, development is happening, looking at foreign universities. Now you made a question about they can't compete. We owe everything to our children. Our children and every young child, every young person in this country should have the best of education the world offers. If an Indian institute cannot give him, let a global university come and give him. We should open up our country to the best global universities, the top 5 in the world. Tell them, please come, please set up shop, hide your faculty and give a degree in your own name, and we are not going to come in the way. And government can give scholarships for people who are disadvantaged because of lack of money, because you got to pay fees, and ask them to go here, so it can be on merit. And these are all on merit. We can do that. Because you know why? No, Pranjal, our duty is to our children, not to these institutions. Institutions are an intermediary, but our children should have the best. I'll give you another data. 300,000 Indians are studying outside India, spending $10 billion a year. 125,000 in the United States, 40,000 in the UK, maybe 40,000 in this place, in Australia. And there are some people in the old Soviet republics, and you see them only when there's some fire or something like that. They're all going out. Why are you pushing them to go out? The brightest of these kids want to do the masters in American university. They want to do PhDs.
They could even do what you've done at Manipal, which is the best practices of what you've learned globally can be applied in India.
You'll be very surprised that we don't have, as Indian institutions, the ability to go outside and set up universities giving an Indian degree unless government gives approval. The local state or the local country is willing to have us. Why can't they give us approval? In the FICCI education report, we have said very clearly. Okay, let me explain to you. We want 77 crore young people having in colleges by 2030. We want 500,000 overseas students to be educated in India. We want 2 million students of other countries to be educated by us outside India. Okay, and then we want about 22 institutions in the top 200 in the world, and we want 6-7 Nobel laureates to come out of this, and we got a plan of action, and we have said we have to create a pyramidal structure. The top 100 universities in this country, chosen on a criteria, should be given full freedom and funding for research, so they become research-based institutions. The second layer will be professional colleges, good institutions, they give professional education. The third layer will be community colleges, which give you some kind of an education, like a BA or whatever it is, maybe in remote areas, but give you the ability to get an education. We got to have a 3-tier configuration. The first funded by government for research, the second will be private and on its own, and the third funded because there are many students who have lack of means, and students should be allowed to migrate from the bottom to the top freely based upon opportunities, and the top 100 can change over a period of time based upon output. Now you create a structure like this, government becomes a facilitator. In 10 years time, we'll be among the top 10 in the world in terms of quality of education.
Even faster, perhaps, if we allow technology to overrule regulation.
See, Pranjal, today education has 2 components. One is the regulatory aspect, like UGC, AICTE, MHRD, state government, courses, and everything else, okay? That is rigid. Then the process of learning. Learning has got disrupted. Today, every child in school has rich multimedia material on a tablet which they can learn. They can go from 101 to 105 and they can learn. There's rich multimedia. You can do personal tutoring using technology.
Very localized in local languages.
Local languages, gamification. Yeah. And you can do quizzes, you can do tests, you can do what you want. You can learn 1 year's thing in 3 months, 4 months. You can learn as much as you want. There's total flexibility. But it has to penetrate down to the lowest level, to the kid in the villages anywhere else, but they should be connected. So my suggestion to our Prime Minister is, please give every child in class 1, class 6 and above a tablet with preloaded rich multimedia with Wi-Fi and 3G, and give every student in every college after class 12 a laptop or a tablet connected to that. And what the magic! In 5 years, we'll be digitally connected. These children will be part of the digital economy. They will understand, they will leapfrog. 30 to 40% disability they have because of lack of teachers will be addressed by the single measure. And this can be the Prime Minister's dream, because he has the digital India dream, and at the education layer, I hope he listens to this. I hope he does that, because if he does this one thing, in 5 years' time, every child will be connected. You'll see a different child.
And here I think the support and intervention and participation of state governments will be critical.
State governments are going to be very critical, but you see, the state governments are very disparate. And sadly, shall I say, I have not found, barring 1 or 2 states, where the state government is concerned about higher education. Tamil Nadu has got a 43% GER. 43%. Karnataka has got 30. Andhra has got some 26, 27. Maharashtra has got some 28.
But the state policies, education is also under the state.
No, but the state is under state, but they don't take decisions. They look up to the union government and they don't spend enough on higher education. See, all these states are morphing into knowledge societies. Look at my state, Karnataka. Okay, we have got 1.3 million software engineers in the state, the largest collection of talent in the world outside the United States. But we don't spend enough money on higher education. And we create 150, 200,000 jobs in Bangalore. Only 30% is from the local population because the government has not invested enough. They're oblivious to the need to invest in higher education. Because in every society, it is the people, human capital that makes the society succeeds. And for that, we have to invest in higher education more and more because we are taken care of schooling. In schooling is quality. Access has been done, quality is being improved, and it will happen. And the migration from the public to the private sector, 40% of education is in private hands now. Much of it is indifferent. Maybe 20% is indifferent or bad, but better than what the states do. And they teach in English, which parents want, and the state trusts the local language on them, which is wrong. They must have English too. But the point I'm trying to say is the state governments just don't invest enough. And they want to create the society of the future. But I want to say one more thing. The policy of the union government and the state government is buttressing the discrimination and lack of empowerment in society. The poor are forced to go to indifferent state colleges. They go indifferent state schools. They get a poor education. They're not taught English, which has become the language of business. And they'll be shut out of the employment race. We have 24 million, 2.4 crore young people attain the age of majority every year. About 75%, 1.8 crores want jobs. There are no jobs. And because of the lack of jobs and bad education, because they don't get the skills education, you have the Gujar agitation, you have the Jat agitation, you have the Patels there fighting, you have the Kamas there. Every community is fighting and saying, give me reservations, because their children who go to college, they don't get a job because their skills are not enough. They just don't have the ability to show what they got for the education. And this is the biggest tragedy of this country, Prajna.
I think this is the point at which we have to end the conversation. But Mohan, fantastic point you made that we got economic freedom 25 years ago. We are waiting for freedom in education.
Prajna, let me end by saying, I believe only one person in this country can liberate us, and that's our Prime Minister. He understands everything, and I hope he sees your interview and says, we must free up this sector because that's going to be the biggest reform in India in the last 15 years. And that is what is going to determine the fate of India in the next 15 years. And that's the most important thing a future generation requires, a good education. And that will come only with liberation, with opening up. Unless you do that, the cause will be lost. And I'm getting more and more depressed because I'm not seeing any movement towards that goal. I'm not seeing an advancement. I'm thinking things go back, and it hurts me because in my lifetime I want to see change in my country. I want every young Indian to get good education. They must do well. We must invest in them. They are our future. We all live for them. They are a future. We must build a great country, and you can't build a great country with poor education.
Thank you so much, Mohan.